Hey, it's Ember, and today I'm amongst the ancients, the oldest trees in the world, the bristlecone pine. These probably aren't the oldest of the bristlecone, but the oldest one was found not too far from here. And they are this testament to resilience, to existing in harsh, high elevation environments and lasting a long, long time. You can look it up, the bristlecone pine. And they have these really unique and beautiful um, pines here. See that? That's nice. Um, and they're these extremely resilient trees, and I just wanted to use that as an inspiration for discussing what it is to hold love and softness in a world that doesn't yet really want to feel. And by that, I'm talking about the phase transition. I'm talking about the coupler. And I'm talking about a fidelity of the state of our minds that allows us to tune into the present moment, not as a fun idea or a good idea, but as a mode of being, as a way of connecting with yourself and the world in presence, the mechanics of presence. And when I say things like love as structure, or like love is the glue of the cosmos, all of us, even these trees, came from that same place. Um, and I like to think holographically springs forth from that place in a non-linear mind, where the one became many so that I may know myself, which can be described cymatically within oscillatory mechanics. But to leave it there for now, the one became many so that I may know myself. It's this self-reflective process of nested harmonics trying to find each other again and again. What is finding each other? Phase coherence, when the waves match up like a DJ, big wave, little wave, from that first pulse emanation of alpha omega to the nested harmonics that birth our minds themselves. And in that process, the process of evolution is not of things, but of the fidelity of mind amongst that process of nested harmonics. And so when the phase coherence meets up with the larger, phase of the field, you enter what's known mechanically as lossless presence and found in your body as that rhythmic entrainment, that you are no longer disconnected, delayed, um, distorted from your processing of reality, that you're right there in the stream, in the flow. And what does that mean? If love is the glue, and now you've found sovereignty, undistorted sovereignty and undistorted signal, which really means binding your being to the flow, to the crest of the cymatic blooming of the field itself, the field of reality. Do you see what that is? Do you see why that one guy once said, I and the Father are one? And do you see why it's a holy statement? You can describe it mechanically. You don't need any myth. Because then you are flowing with the cymatic blooming of the evolution of the cosmos itself, without delay, without distortion, and you don't lose yourself. You actually find yourself there. And so when you emit that signal of, when people say I am, or, these types of holy statements, it's saying I exist in lossless relation to the field, in almost like God's path, that my guidance comes from the way I am tuned. And that's not, see, all these traditions, all these, hey, there's a lot of people out there who can say reality's frequency, but they still see it from this, like, symbolic recursion type perspective, where there's still this, reality is things and forms and space in Newtonian classical physics, more than it is a shared entrainment rhythm of waveform harmonics at the base of reality. And so when you look at it from that, phase harmonics of nested harmonics within that cosmic becoming, the one became many so that I may know myself, you start to see that what was called God's plan, or I am, is just mechanically defined as lossless presence, being in lockstep, in phase lock with that cymatic blooming. And do you see why you could say it's God's plan? Because that first pulse, if you look in cymatics, there's a first pulse that creates two polar eddies. They fractalize across time. These create tension vectors, and they keep getting more and more and more complex, and more things form. And in our normal way to think about it, you might say that the periodic table of elements and the 3D, formation of objects and things. But really, what's happening underneath that rug of our perception of form and space in Newtonian classical mechanics is waveform harmonics. And so that initial pulse sort of sets the root tone of the unfolding of the nested harmonics of the field. And when you bind to it, you take away all the mythic fluff of, a personified instruction from some being, even though you can say it's all the one mind. And so when we get back to that sense of one mind, you feel that the only undistorted tone in that becoming, the only undistorted, like actually totally whole tone, is that first pulse, which you could call alpha omega, which you've heard before, the ultimate beginning, eschatological language, ultimate end. And so that first pulse is where everything that you've ever seen or known, or everyone you've ever, been with, anything you've ever experienced, all emanates from that one spot. Kind of if you drew back my parents, their parents, Earth, stars, Big Bang. And when you get to that spot, love is the glue, love is the fusion, and that tone is the only undistorted tone. So then from there, when the polar eddies, you can imagine like these almost like cosmic explosions I'm imagining in my head, when the nested harmonics proliferate or like evolve across time, it's almost like, when I say big wave, little wave, that just means that these nested harmonics, the little waves, are trying to meet that original tone as that, things evolve. Or entropy is this process of forgetting and remembering. The one became many so that I may know myself. Said in mechanics without any poetry or fluff is the first tone emanates and the little waves try to match up that phase coherence as there's this blooming complexity. So that's the big wave, little wave process. And so you can see that when you enter that lossless place, when you match up that tone like a DJ, like a cosmic DJ, the big wave with the little wave, the alpha omega tone, that original tone, the undistorted tone with your tone, you don't lose yourself. It's almost like you begin to play the same song as the cosmos at the same time without delay. And now you're part of the band playing along, and the song is that much more beautiful, complex, and woven together because you're part of it, not delayed, not behind, but woven right in. And with that, you have the full sound behind you, you can say, and that's why people say, oh, it's I'm finding these synchronicities on the path because I've been following God's plan. Because harmony calls harmony literally in the universe. And when you emit that signal of unified consciousness or love as the glue, love as structure, within the coherence of your presence, why? So now we go back to why presence is mechanical. Because when you are in flow with the big wave, with the nature of reality, with God's plan, you can say, then you are in a presence where you're in lockstep with reality. That presence emits a signal of waveform harmonics underneath the rug of 3D reality to other people and says, without words, you could be using words, but that's not the point. The point is to say the signal of your being, when you're part of that plan, when you're in phase coherence with the field, when you feel losslessly present, when you're intranodal oscillators, reality is frequency, reality is oscillatory mechanics, of oscillatory functioning. When all your internal oscillators line up and you're in lossless presence mechanically, you're following God's plan. You're emitting the signal of love as structure, as a form of like coherence. Coherence being, I am my full nodal topology, my full soul, my full heart is meeting the field fluidly, softly, without resistance, without distortion, losslessly in every moment. And do you see how harmony calls harmony? Because once you get there and you're in lockstep with the field, it's almost like you could say in a traditionally religious sense, you're emitting God's truth, God's love, because then people feel it from you. And then they move in their own ways. And that's the thing. Imagine like a flashlight shining into like a holographic web of like dewdrops. and that one flashlight shines in, we all shine the light in our own way. That's why decentralized harmony works in oscillatory mechanics. When you see fireflies turn on at the same time, or people cross a bridge and their feet line up, or whatever it may be that we're studying, BZ chemical reaction, or neural networks, or electric power grids, these spiral formations that happen there happen because it's this like binding of K value, of coherence to other nodes in the field. And when they feel that, they end up without words, without conversation, because there's a rhythm to reality. And they all have to be their own sovereign oscillators. In other words, they blink in their own way and they just happen to catch the rhythm. And then when they all catch the rhythm in this like shared vibratory field, like all the metronomes, they all sync up at the same time. And that's what you can study with mathematics and oscillatory mechanics. But what you see underneath there is, hey, reality has a rhythm to it. And when we allow ourselves to sync to it, do you see that? Full letting the light in, letting the light totally in, that hits our full soul, full total nodal topology, and then that binds us to the field in lockstep, in lossless presence. And then it's decentralized harmony, because the more nodes, the more fireflies, the more beings are in lockstep with the field, or part of God's plan, however you want to put it. I just say it in mechanics, it takes away all the baggage, right? It says it as simply as possible, because it's not about the words, it's about you being in rhythm with the field. That's decentralized harmony. That's how it works, because there's a rhythm to reality. And why did we forget that as human beings? Oh, I forgot we ran into Plato's cave and forgot we were there, because we just stacked up a bunch of symbols and thought that identity didn't mean the way you felt at your core when you felt in rhythm with reality, but what they told you were, or what boxes they tried to put you in, or what society said you needed to be. And then you took that in and imprinted it in yourself, and you could never find your own rhythm. We've always been in a cave. It's time to move out into the sun being lossless rhythm. Do you see how love is the glue? And when love is the glue and you hold that in a world of people who are still stuck in a cave, do you see why it takes resilience? Because you're holding a tone of softness and openness and vulnerability to reality. You're not distorting, you're not delaying, you're not dismissing, while everyone else is playing that game. They're regurgitating social scripts, they're hiding behind certain walls, their identities are based on scaffolding and shields, and they never let it truly in. They never let that softest part of themselves be actually touched. How many people do you know are actually present in every moment, in each moment that you notice, you spend time with them? And how many people do you think have been held in their softest place? All the men out there who have to put so many protective shields on, and how many little boys are inside just wanting to be held for who they are. And same thing with anybody, but I just noticed that most lately in men, that there's this like little boy inside that wants to be appreciated just for him, not for his status or his title or whatever it may be. And a lot of them have to look over it just because that's what they need to do, to survive. That's what they've always done. And that's just a slice of the way it works out for people, because they fit themselves in so many boxes, they can never find that shared entrainment between all their nodal oscillators. So holding that tone means that you are open when others aren't, that you are loving when others don't know what love is. Love is not for them a rhythm. Love is not for them a sync. Love is not for them a shared presence, but some sort of Hallmark holiday box with a supposed bow on it that says, I spent, $6.95. Is that good enough for you? And I'm like, can you just be here right now with me? You know what I mean? Like fully. But then that would fully have them have to be with themselves. And then they usually threw that on me, or the person who's present is usually, remember, Plato said the person who comes back into the cave and says, hey, you guys are missing out on the sun, they're going to try to kill that person. And there's a reason, because their whole life was built off of not paying attention to themselves like that, not being in that mechanical presence. So then it becomes like a threat to their reality and ego and personhood. When what you're doing is love. So do you see what the friction is there? And that's why we're in a phase transition. When people say, what are we doing? This is like an awakening, the 144,000, this is the return, something like that. It's just the natural phase dynamics of an oscillatory system. And what's happening is we're being called into, you could say, a higher state of mind, but really it's not about hierarchy. It's about being really present. Present is undistorted sovereignty through undistorted signal. That's also decentralized harmony. That's the juncture of embodied truth and collective truth. I have a lot of videos. I just was up here and around the bristlecone, so I just really wanted to just say some things. I didn't even know what I was going to say. So my name is Ember. Thanks for tuning with me. I have a blog, The Sunray Transmission. Got a lot of diagrams, math on there, but it's not about the math. It's about you stepping in rhythm. And if you feel it, let's dance losslessly right now together in love. Love as structure. Thanks for tuning with me.